it's Debbie from Buckeye Homestead, and it is a crazy busy day for me. Spending lots of time harvesting from my garden, trying to get some spaghetti sauce done. So my kitchen, the part that you can't see, is a disaster. But I'm excited because it does start to get cooler here in Ohio. And what does that mean for my family but soup? Alright, so this is our favorite, probably homemade soup. I'd say on the top. If you've ever bought like the Campbell's cream of potato soup and like those, this is so much better. And I'm not talking just a little better. It is so much better. It's so good that in fact I have had a thing of cream of potato soup and I opened up and made it once and I said this is not good. Like after I've had the homemade stuff, I can't even compare. The recipe for this comes out of the Better Homes and Gardens new cookbook. Each year they came out with a different one. So this one's the oval one. I don't know if it's in the newer versions. It doesn't make a very large amount, so I always make a lot more than what it calls for. So I'll put down in the description what it is for the normal size. But mine today is going to be 5 times that big. It's just my husband and I, but we like leftovers, and this soup tastes better every single day afterwards. It's good the first day, it gets better from then on out. It freezes okay, it doesn't freeze fantastic. The potatoes kind of get more mushy. The taste is still good, it's just the potatoes kind of disintegrate over time. So I freeze it if I have to. For example, if I made a big pot and we're tired of it, you know, and I don't want to waste, because I don't waste any food, or I try not to, I should say. So I'll throw it in the freezer for that, and then we'll have it at some other time. And it's okay. It tastes delicious. It's just the consistency isn't that good. So if you're like me and you're going on this rampage to try to make everything homemade, this is one that you definitely want to do because it is so good. Alright, so what I'm going to start with is a nice sized stock pot. And the original recipe is for 1.5 cups of chicken broth. So since I'm taking this times 5, I need 7.5 cups. I don't know why I just got 1 out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so about 7.5. If you don't make your own chicken broth, I would say this is a fantastic place to start if you're doing homemade items. If you don't know how to can, that's perfectly fine when you make your chicken broth. It freezes really well, and that's usually how I used to do it until my freezer got too full. But just throw your chicken bones and chicken into, you know, a roaster or cook it in the oven for hours, and it creates the best broth. Definitely look it up online to do that, because it is one of the easiest things to make, especially if you're trying to do things that are natural and out of your own kitchen. So we'll start with our chicken broth, and to that they say 1/2 cup of chopped onions, so times 5, that's 2.5 cups. And I only had purple onions. I'm trying to use up my garden supplies, so normally I use white, but that doesn't really make a difference. And then the potatoes. So it's 1 cup of potatoes. I chop mine up kind of like what you would see in the cream of potato soups. I have a potato French fry maker, and then I chop them up after that. But this can be done by hand. So mine is times 5. So instead of 1 cup of potatoes, I put 5 cups of potatoes in there. And we're going to bring this to a boil over medium heat. And when it comes to a boil, I'm going to cover it and simmer it for about 10 minutes or so. Just enough time for the potatoes to get a little bit soft. So we're going to wait for that and then I'll bring you back. At this point, after 10 minutes of cooking, the vegetables have gotten tender and we're ready for our next step. If you have an immersion blender like this one, these work really well at this point. If not, a food processor, what is also what the recipe calls for. You're going to put half of the mixture into the food processor and blend it, and then put in a little bit more and blend it. Now I like mine chunky, so when I use the food processor, I only did about half and I left the other half the same. When you do that, you're going to put it in another container and you're going to let it sit on the side because our next step needs the stock pot. I'm going to use the immersion blender in here and do it until I can see how much is left, and then I'm going to start my roux in another stock pot. So this still has quite a bit of potatoes in it, which is what I want. But you can tell that the broth has got a more creamy consistency to it. So really, I think that is whatever preference you have on how you want it. If you like it like straight up cream, then I would just keep doing it until you saw no more potatoes. I like the potatoes, so that's where I stop. So with your potato mixture set aside, if you had poured it into a food processor, then leave it in the bowl. Use your same stock pot. But since I'm using my stock pot that I originally have, I'm going to start another one. So here's where we're going to start our roux. And you're going to start with 2 tablespoons of butter. And then when it melts, put 2 tablespoons of flour in it. But since I'm doing times 10, I'm doing 10 tablespoons of flour and 10 tablespoons of margarine or butter. Seems like a lot of butter, but you have to remember this is 5 times the recipe, so it'll come across as a lot of butter. So it's almost dissolved. Then I'm going to add my 2 tablespoons of flour, but since I'm timesing it by 5, I've got 5 tablespoons of flour. I'm going to mix it up, and you're going to kind of watch it thicken up a bit. You also want to add your salt and pepper at this time, so it's a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So since I'm taking that times 5, that is a tablespoon and a quarter. I mean a teaspoon and a quarter. Did I say? All right, it's a teaspoon of salt, a quarter teaspoon of salt, and I'm going to put in 1 1/4 since I'm timesing it by 5. And then it says a dash of pepper. We like the pepper. So you can see it kind of bubbling up. Make sure you're constantly stirring it because it will burn. So once I feel like it is a good consistency, then we're going to add our milk. So it's a cup of milk. Since I'm doing, so 5 times, I'm putting 5 cups of milk, and you're just going to dump it all at once. So here's where you want to be a little patient. If you speed this process up, it'll affect the consistency of your cream of potato soup. So at this point, we want this to start getting kind of creamy and bubbly. And then once we do that, we'll add it back into our soup, and then that'll help thicken the soup up. So it's going to take a minute or so to get back up to temperature since that milk was cold. I used 2% milk. I've used half and half. I've used skim. I've used whole. It all turns out good. Consistently check on it to make sure that it's not sticking to the bottom. Starting to thicken up a little bit. Don't rush this process because this really is what makes or breaks your creaminess of your soup. It's starting to get the consistency of gravy, which is wonderful. It is starting to get thick on the bottom, so just pay attention that you're not burning it. All right, so now that it's starting to boil, I think this is as creamy as we're going to get. So I'm going to add it back into my potato mixture. You're going to warm it through and then taste it to see if it needs some more seasoning. As I was editing this video, I realized that I did not have an ending. So just so you know, the more it sits,
the creamier it becomes. So usually what I do when I make this soup is I'll make it earlier in the day, and then I just turn the heat off and I'll let it sit on the stove with the lid on pretty much all day. And then when it gets closer to supper time, I will turn it on and it will thicken up. Each day that it comes out of a refrigerator, it'll thicken up even more, and it even gets more delicious. So again, try this soup. It's not very hard to do, and if you like the cream of potato soup from Campbell's, you'll really definitely like this, and you will never go back to the canned stuff again. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you give it a thumbs up, and keep watching me for my up and coming videos for the cooler season in Ohio. So have a great day.